Carrie. My name's Sal Curran. I'm the Executive Director of the Volunteer Lawyers Project of CNY, and I'm happy to say I'm joined here today with Pauline Smith, my colleague, who is Pro Bono Coordinator and Paralegal. So today we will be spending about 1 hour with you, and our goal is to frame the work that Volunteer Lawyers Project does within a DEI lens. I see who has joined us today, and it's a lot of familiar faces and some new folks as well. Hopefully this will involve some learning for everybody. If you have questions along the way, I know it's a Zoom chat, so it's not as interactive as if we were in a room together and could just chat together. But if you have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat, and Pauline and I will keep monitoring that and field your questions as we go. So to start with, Volunteer Lawyers Project of Central New York, we're a nonprofit legal aid organization. We provide free legal information, assistance, and representation in all sorts of civil legal matters. I see some of our colleagues from some of the other legal aid organizations in town. And so, I want to shout out their agencies. We're part of a network of legal aid organizations, and I often think of Volunteer Lawyers Project as sort of a stopgap or an organization of last resort. Because what we do is we leverage the power of the private legal bar, including volunteer attorneys, paralegals, law students, a ton of law students, and even some undergraduates, to help address the inequities in the access to justice system for our most vulnerable communities. So, just to be very transparent, I'm hoping today that those who are joining who don't currently volunteer with us will take interest, feel inspired, and join our volunteer team. So Volunteer Lawyers Project, we've been working a lot on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and really framing the work that we do in that way. And one of the steps that we took this past year was to pass a values statement. And so we really are founded in the idea that everyone deserves access to justice. And our values encompass the culture and spirit of our organization. They guide our programming and communicate our priorities. So our values are respect, empathy. Sorry, I gotta click on the right spot. Okay, respect. When we say respect, we root ourselves in our shared humanity and prioritize centering compassion in our work. We treat our clients with the same care as our colleagues and friends, without judgment, and we honor the lived experiences and decisions of those we serve. Empathy, we commit to showing up for each other and ensuring one another feels heard and appreciated. And we understand the prevalence and impact of trauma, and therefore treat our clients with sensitivity. We acknowledge that inclusion of diverse perspectives helps us better promote access to justice and brings awareness to the feelings of others. Now, this is really critical because so much of the work that Volunteer Lawyers Project is doing is addressing legal issues that either arise from trauma or have the effect of causing trauma, whether that is in immigration, fleeing persecution in another country, whether it's here having the trauma of facing eviction, having been evicted, even the trauma of, having your belongings thrown out by a landlord, things like that. So we really try to be aware of that and the effect that has on the individual lives and also the collective lives of our community. Transparency. This is really critical too. A lot of the clients that we serve, they may or may not have had interactions with the court system or, the justice system before that were positive. They might have been negative. We don't know. And we find that one of the most important things to do is to be very transparent and clear with our clients and with those we're working around about the work that we're doing. We want to set clear expectations, not overpromise, and be accountable to the community that we're serving. And finally, collaboration, and this is key. We really truly believe that we are best able to do our work when we collaborate in the community. So as you will see, we're talking about where we do our work and how we do our work. It is integrated. It's integrated into the courts, into libraries, community center, partner agencies. And the idea is that we are just one critical part of a full ecosystem that serves our clients. So when we're talking about diversity and equity and inclusion, we're talking about a larger systemic view of how to address what our community is facing. We're not just talking about numbers. We're not talking about diversity quotas or even just discrimination. We're talking about larger systems that the folks we're serving are tied into. So part of this, we also passed as part of Volunteer Lawyers Project an equity and anti-oppression statement. And I'm just gonna drop the link to our website in the chat for those who want, let's see, hosts and panelists. Carrie, do you know how to make it so that I can send it out to everybody? Well, I guess.
I don't.
Okay, well, I will drop it. I will email it out to everybody. We have an equity and anti-oppression statement. And it is summed up. It's a longer statement, but we sum it up on these pages. We strive to identify and dismantle systems of inequality, equity, and oppression, and particularly those that impede access to justice. And we're going to go into kind of what we're talking about in our different programs and giving examples of these systemic oppressions. Next, we fight within our programs for equitable access to justice. And we do this not only in our day-to-day service, but also in some of the advocacy that we do on a statewide level regarding access to right to counsel and things like that. And we really try to center our programs around the experiences of those impacted by the systems of oppression. So, we try to make sure that we are structuring our programs in a way that make it so that people have access to get to the attorneys, have understanding about the complexity of the cases, and have full representation whenever possible. And then we also, spend a substantial amount of time trying to help other legal professionals, clients, and the community understand their rights, because that's really central to being able to advocate and for inclusion in the process. We do try to talk about anti-racism and anti-oppression in all aspects of what we do at this point. We try to be trauma-informed and inclusive. And we do expect our volunteers, when they take on a case, to be compassionate and respectful of clients, of the staff, and of each other. We have board members that include community stakeholders who help to develop our new programs. That's true both of our board and our programs committee, which is open to the larger community. So if you're interested in helping us develop our programs or helping us expand our services and meet more needs, we're always looking for new volunteers on our programs committee. And of course, we do these presentations. We do ask, of course, that staff and volunteers always honor the pronouns that individuals use. So, honoring their identities. We ask that people use professional interpretation services. Now, this is actually a great thing. When you volunteer with VLP, we provide you for free the access to professional interpretation services. And we try whenever possible to have those be in person. And if they can't be in person, we do have remote and telephonic options as well. And we try to ensure that we're welcoming clients in culturally appropriate ways. So I'm going to hand it over to Pauline to talk a little bit about why equity is such a critical issue when doing poverty law here in Central New York.
I'm here to talk just a little bit about, I'll introduce the theories and our goals behind what we do. And I'm here to talk a little bit about how we do it. and why we do it the way we do it. So our poverty rates in New York State, you might say, well, Syracuse isn't any different than anywhere else in New York State. But if you look at the poverty rates in upstate New York and New York City, Syracuse, our poverty rate is actually higher than Rochester, Albany, and New York City per capita. We have a 32% poverty rate in 2017, and COVID has actually only increased that inequity. So, we strive to actually understand that poverty impacts everything that we do. Okay, so in one of our practice areas, the Housing and Eviction Prevention Unit, we looked at how housing costs are reflected in what we do and how housing costs impact what we do as far as diversity, equity, and inclusion. And if you look at the statistics in 2016, the US Census Bureau showed that the average cost of housing in Syracuse was $759. Well, after that time, actually, there are new statistics that show that Syracuse rents have increased 39% between January 2020 and January 2024. It's actually a bigger increase than any other city in New York State. In 2017, 40% of households in the city of Syracuse had an annual income under $25,000. That means that 40% of the population could not afford their rental payment in the city of Syracuse. If you take that rental payment should be less than 30% of the person's income, that would mean that if the average person made under $25,000, that would mean that their average rent should be under $625 a month, but the average in 2016 was $759. So it was already bad before COVID. Only 8.5% of housing in Syracuse are subsidized enough to be affordable to those making under $25,000 a year. So that means we don't even have enough subsidized housing for those needing it. And it's also estimated in the city of Syracuse, there are an annual number of evictions that are about 5 to 7% of the population. That means about 8,000 to 11,000 people out of the 144,000 residents are evicted every year in the city of Syracuse. So that shows you kind of why we need our housing and eviction prevention program. Okay, so, all right. So you might ask yourself, well, how did we get here? Well, how did we get here? And what are the barriers for tenants when they have to seek justice in our tenant courts? I'm going to give a brief 1-minute summary of how we got here. Okay, so Syracuse is actually very typical of other cities in that a lot of our neighborhoods were developed via zoning regulation. In the 1920s, the first zoning regulation was put in the city of Syracuse, which actually regulates who can live where. The Homeowners Loan Corporation in the 1930s determined that they were going to categorize neighborhoods in the city of Syracuse and other cities around the country. There are about 200 cities. They were going to categorize them according to risk. And the risk was going to be a foreclosure prevention means. That's what they said. It was foreclosure preventative. So they started assigning colors to different neighborhoods. And the color would be based upon the race of people who lived in that neighborhood, the economic conditions in the neighborhood, things that were available as far as like parks and things like that in neighborhoods, and things that were located like factories and other things in neighborhoods, as well as housing conditions in those neighborhoods. So then they went through and they assigned a color. Neighborhoods that were largely African American were assigned red colors, the color red. Now you might say, well, what does it matter if we assign a color to a neighborhood? Well, what mattered was that the HOLC wouldn't loan money to individuals within that red-lined district to buy property or to fix property that they already own. So that meant that individuals who lived in red-lined areas were largely shut out from either owning or improving real property. How does that show up in communities? Well, it shows up because we don't have generational wealth building. Real estate is the #1 builder of generational wealth in non-African American families, and it has been generationally that way. If you look at the map that we have given on this slide, The first red line neighborhood in the city of Syracuse was just east of downtown. And if you look, there were other neighborhoods that were increasingly assigned red line that went around I-81. And what happened there was a ward called the 15th Ward. That was the other red line district in the city. That neighborhood, when they built 81, they removed that neighborhood. It was 90% African American. And those individuals were dispersed to other parts of the city and were spread out along that I-81 corridor. If you notice, there's a lot of public housing built in that area. Well, those neighborhoods were continued to be redlined. And so even if folks who lived in that red line neighborhood moved to other neighborhoods, those neighborhoods were then redlined by virtue of that migration. So how, what did that also mean? It also meant that landlords in those neighborhoods could not fix up the housing stock, because where are those folks going to go? They don't have any other options. The housing stock is poor, and they're largely people of certain demographics were regulated to certain neighborhoods, and so the landlords just would continue to increase rents without reinvesting in those neighborhoods. This continued until the 1960s when the Fair Housing Act came along, but by that point the damage was already done. I mean, neighborhoods along the I-81 corridor were already established as primarily low-income African-American and non-white neighborhoods. There were other parts of the city. If you look at the South Side, increasingly became, low-income, non-white, as well as some neighborhoods in the North Side. And those are all as a result of that, the redlining and the redrawing of maps. Now that you might say is well, how did this corporation or this government entity or this control that much of our zoning? Well, they did it in conjunction with local governments. The city of Syracuse actually participated in creating these red line districts. So what is that? Until 1968, when the Fair Housing Act ended that, you would say that African American folks really did not have the chance to establish generational wealth through home building. So where does that result now? More African American folks live in rental houses than folks of other races, and more low-income people live in rental housing in the city of Syracuse than other socioeconomic classes. The other thing is, there are no right to counsel in landlord-tenant court. Landlords are often represented by counsel. There's no right to counsel for tenants in those courts. And you would say, well, then people should find better housing. But unfortunately, you can't find better housing in an area where all the housing stock is poor. Housing stock in Syracuse is the average of 70 years old. That is the oldest housing stock in not just New York State, but in the country. So that's just a 1 to 2 minute little blurb about redlining and how we got where we are.
Yeah, thank you so much, Pauline. And I think we have The Color of Law on our suggested reading list. If we don't, it's a great book that goes further in depth into this. But a great summary. Now, I'm going to go on to talk about how VLP, the work that we do, tries to address some of this. The first thing that we do is we do provide direct representation to prevent eviction. And sometimes that's negotiating a lot more time, but more often it's trying to actually prevent the eviction. And we are actively looking for volunteers who are willing to take on full representation cases. This has become even more critical right now. I'm just going to add some more statistics on top of what Pauline was saying. 1 in 10 students in Syracuse City School District are currently homeless. This is the highest rate of homelessness that we've had in, I believe, over 20 years. So we're really at a crisis point with our housing. Also, with what Pauline mentioned of housing having increased, it's actually 20% year over year for many of the past years. Across the board, people are not being able to afford housing, and it's taking them 4 to 6 months to find a new house. In the eviction proceeding, in a best, if you don't have defenses that can prevent the eviction, you're looking at usually around a 1 to 1.5 month turnaround between the petition and when you would potentially need to be out. So that's definitely contributing in a very serious way to family homelessness, which is what we've seen growing so much. So we hope you'll consider joining us with full direct representation. We also go out in the community regularly and do trainings for the city of Syracuse, for the tenants union and others to educate tenants on their rights. And as part of our equity goals, the last time we did our strategic plan, we decided to start doing policy advocacy priorities. And one of the things that Volunteer Lawyers Project has been very active in is advocating for a right to counsel in eviction. We've been supporting the statewide coalition and are very active in the New York Legal Services Coalition. And so we've been talking with our legislators. We're happy to say that Senator May is the sponsor of that right to counsel legislation. And it is currently in both of the one House budgets this year to create an office that would stand up a program for right to counsel, which we're really excited about. The other issues we've been trying to advocate for are good cause eviction, which is trying to make it so that people cannot so that landlords can't terminate a tenancy unless there's a reason for it. So if you're paying your rent and you're not causing like a legal nuisance, you're maintaining the property, that you should be able to continue to rent, and that the landlords also can't raise the rent an unreasonable amount. So, I believe they say, cap it at 5% unless there's a reason for it. So right now, we've had landlords, I get tenants who tell me stories, they were paying $900 a month. Literally, the landlord gives them a notice that says, hey, in 60 days or 90 days, they follow the law, we're increasing your rent to $1,400 a month, but no repairs have been done to the property. And so good cause doesn't say you can't increase it. It just says it needs to be tied out to repairs. If you're going to be increasing the rent by 60% in 1 year, you need to have a reason for it. So that's something we definitely are strongly advocating for as well. And then we do information and counseling sessions. So right now we have twice a month tenant rights clinic at Salt City Market, our friends over there. And we're also working on bringing back a morning of clinic for pro se tenants. And part of what we're doing there is not just defending against evictions, but helping tenants prepare their tenant dignity actions to force the landlord to make repairs. This has already been having a huge impact as we've been bringing cases or using this as counterclaims here in Syracuse. We've had multiple cases where landlords have had the eviction dismissed as retaliatory, which is to say the tenant was complaining about codes. The landlord tried to evict them for that. And then not only was that eviction dismissed, but now the landlord has to make repairs to the property to make it habitable for human habitation. So it's a really exciting time to be involved in eviction prevention and tenant rights. And I really hope you'll consider joining us in that. Our next area we're going to talk about is LGBT rights. Pauline, did you want to do the facts on this one, or do you want me to?
I can do that one, that's fine.
Okay.
So in New York State, over 1 million people report being members of this particular community. And 3% of people under the age of 18 report being members of the transgender and non-binary community. That's an interesting statistics because if you look at those over the age of 18, it's about 0.5%. So that is a growing segment of this particular community. With that increase, there's also been an increase in hate crimes. When folks are increasingly targeted by media and things like that, we have the corresponding rise in hate crime incidents. And 78% of those fatal attacks in New York State were against Black and Latino people. And that is a really vulnerable segment of this particular population because generally, they don't have as much economic and socioeconomic opportunity and the ability to hire counsel and things like that. There's also some issues with law enforcement as far as the misgendering of folks in the trans community. One of our particular focuses is the idea that not having identification documents that match gender identity puts a person at risk and really does impact them being able to obtain employment and being outed as trans in the world, which at this time is not necessarily a safe thing.
There are lots of barriers to justice for the LGBT plus community, so lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender community. Do you want me to hop in on these ones, Pauline?
Yeah.
Okay. So, transgender workers report a much higher rate of unemployment as the general population. And so our LGBT rights program does, in fact, in addition to doing name changes, which is the bulk of what we do, we also do take on work and employment discrimination cases based upon transgender and LGB status as well. The 84% of trans people report having less than a college degree versus 64% of the cis community. And again, this is so cisgender being people who were assigned the same gender or same sex at birth that they identify with now. So, assigned male at birth identifies as male now, assigned female at birth identifies as female now. That's cisgender as opposed to transgender. And so this makes it really hard, especially for our community to navigate the court system, when it can be quite a confusing process. And then, there's an overrepresentation of LGBTQIA people in the criminal justice system. And certainly trans youth have a much higher rate of homelessness than non-trans youth. And that definitely further complicates even things like name changes, because, you have to do all the notice and everything. So I will say, in addition to doing our name changes and our discrimination cases, we do take on individual complex litigation, and often bring in pro bono volunteers for the more complex cases. We have a potential federal case going on that we're just recently intaked. And we occasionally this comes up through immigration as well. So if you're interested in this area of law, do let us know. The majority of the name changes are completed by law students from Cornell Law School, actually. And then during the school year, and then during the summer, it's majority law students from SU in both cases under the supervision of our totally fearless leader, Mallory Livingston, who's a longtime transgender rights advocate. Mallory also was very involved last year in the passage of the Gender Recognition Act, which did things like remove the requirement for publication of transgender name changes. And Mallory's actively working on additional advocacy at this point. Everything from trying to make sure that name change sealing happens immediately to ensuring that New York public health laws are in operating in accordance with international standards regarding the treatment of trans individuals. If anybody has any questions so far, feel free to drop them in the question and answer. Otherwise, we're going to keep right on going right through. I think I already talked about this, sorry. All right, we're going to go into family law and divorce. Do you want to take these stats, Pauline?
Sure. So nationally, 37% of marriages end in divorce. And while divorce rates are decreasing in the US, working parents are the only group where divorce rates continue to rise. We actually see that here in the Syracuse area as well. US Census data indicates that 21% of Syracuse residents are under 21, and that puts them under, if their parents are not married, under the purview of the family court. In the city of Syracuse, 76.8% of households with children are headed by single mothers. Nationally, approximately 30% of parents who should be receiving child support receive no support at all from the other parent, from the non-custodial parent. What does that mean? It means that we have a large population of folks in the city of Syracuse who need assistance with family law and divorce, custody, child support, custody for grandparents, things like that. We have 76% of households headed by single mothers that probably has at least some contact with the family court. Go ahead, Sal.
Oh, okay. So there are a lot of barriers for our clients or the community that we serve in family court. One is that, quite frankly, we do not have a lot of family court attorneys. Hiscox Legal Aid Society has the primary contract to do representation, but there's a very small handful of attorneys that are on the 18B panel. So, we were definitely active in advocating for the increase in the 18B panel rates because we do see this as an access to justice issue. That had thankfully been increased. And of course, I will do the same shout out that I know Judge Karolounis is beating the drum about, which is to encourage law firms to take on 18B work as a access to justice issue to make sure that folks in family court are getting the representation that they need. The family court documents continue to be, while the courts have worked to simplify them over the years, they continue to be too confusing for many people to complete on their own, which is why we have our family court clinic where we help people out. And also we have been assisting increasingly with orders of protection as the Vera House clinic and court has not had the same level of volunteers that they used to have to help out there. So, our family court clinic, which is every Wednesday, we help with simple petitions for child custody, visitation, child support, and orders of protection. We really created this program, I guess 11 years ago in collaboration and with the input of Hiscox and Hiscox Legal Aid and the courts and Vera House to understand how best to meet the needs that were not being met. And we discovered it was really in helping getting people into court and getting advice and counsel where the need was greatest. We also assist domestic violence survivors with filing divorce petitions, not in family court, but in our uncontested divorce program that is a conflict program for Hiscox. And we assist newly released inmates with assessing child support arrears and modifying their support so that they are able to seek employment and actually get on their feet so that they can support their kids going forward. And we're actively working in a collaborative effort with local government to see if there's anything we can do to try to, cap arrears, to try to encourage people to get caught up on their payments. And so we have a small video from Mary John. Hopefully everybody will be able to hear this.
My name is Mary John, and I'm Director of Family Law Services for the Volunteer Lawyers Project. One of our services is that we run a clinic in room 116 of the Onondaga County Courthouse every Wednesday from 9 a.m. to noon and 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. At this clinic, low-income clients can meet with a volunteer attorney who will assist them in preparing petitions for custody, child support, paternity, and family offense petitions. Once the petition is drafted, we will make copies for the client and tell them where they need to file the petition and also what to expect at their first court appearance. We use the same financial guidelines that the court does when assigning a client an attorney to represent them, and that's 250% of the federal poverty guidelines. This clinic is first
Oh, I apologize. I didn't know.
come, first serve, so no appointments are necessary. And we utilize volunteers that are seasoned family court practitioners and those that are not. And for those that do not practice in the area of family law, we offer significant training and CLEs to teach them how to fill out these petitions. In addition to this clinic, we also handle uncontested divorces. These are handled in-house at VLP. We are the conflict provider for Hiscox Legal Aid Society. So if somebody calls our office seeking a divorce, we first refer them to Hiscox Legal Aid. If Hiscox tells them they have a conflict, we have them call us back and then we will do a full intake. Because our program is called an uncontested divorce program, we require that if the parties have children together, that they already have a custody order in place and a child support order in place. And there can be no property that the parties want to have distributed in the divorce. We are simply seeking the divorce and hopefully letting the clients avoid having to go to court. That program is done in-house. We use interns and paralegals to help draft the paperwork and meet with the client and give the client all the necessary information they need to start that process. Thank you.
So we hope that you'll consider joining us in that area of practice. The next
I
area,
can give a shout out for that area of practice because I actually
yeah, please
hosted
do,
that clinic
Polly.
as well, and I think it is a fantastic opportunity for folks who really want to work, who want to try out family law but don't necessarily want to do it every day, or who are, a transactional attorney who wants to have some sort of positive impact. It's fantastic because we're there to support you. This is not a thing where you take a case and go somewhere. We're there the entire time with you, and we'll help you get, file the petitions and do whatever it is that we do in the clinic. So it's a really good opportunity to have a positive impact.
Yeah, and that clinic, again, it's on Wednesdays, and we will often see over 20 clients that day. It's really, the team there does a truly stunning work with the clients and overwhelmingly positive feedback. So, all right. So the next practice area, immigration has really become one of the largest practice areas that Volunteer Lawyers Project has. It is probably 50% of our staff, and we have a combination of both direct representation and pro bono representation. So, Pauline, do you want to talk a little bit about why this area is such a huge area of practice for us here?
Sure. In 2019, it was estimated that immigrants were 6% of the population in Onondaga, Oswego, and Madison County. The Syracuse between 1950 and 2000 had a decrease in population. It was the Rust Belt. There was a lot of declining population. People were moving to other parts of the country. However, immigration is entirely responsible for reversing that trend. Between 2000 and 2014, the city of Syracuse population has grown by 2%. And that's almost entirely due to immigration and refugees moving to the area. We're actually considered to be a center of refugee migration for a lot of different cultures. We have an increasingly large Ukrainian population and an increasingly large Southeast Asian population, which are, specifically moving to Syracuse, not just to the United States, but to Syracuse. So that's an amazing cultural thing that we are privileged to host here in this city. 26% of New Yorkers speak a language other than English. Over 800 different languages are spoken in this country or in this state, but 45% of people who are foreign born and live in New York State do not speak English or don't understand spoken English enough to participate in legal actions on their own. 42% of children of naturalized citizens have bachelor's degrees or higher, but 75% of people who are undocumented end their education in high school. So I think these statistics will show why our program is so important to our community development. Right, go ahead.
Absolutely. And the community development part is such a critical component because really what we are focused on doing is stabilizing families. And when families are stabilized, they have access to education and access to work authorization to be able to participate in the community. And our own center state has put out reports over the years where they've looked at our local community and the economic impact of immigrants in our community, and it is an overwhelmingly positive impact. So there are lots of barriers to immigration, and to access an immigration court. Obviously, fear of engagement with immigration or law enforcement makes it so that folks are afraid to go forward and pursue any kind of like lawful direction they might have to citizenship or permanent residence. Being undocumented can lead to high levels of depression and anxiety. And also, of course, there's language barriers that get in the way of people seeking help. And many undocumented Americans are actually prevented from obtaining any legal status while living in the US, which is very, challenging. So, for VLP, we really try to be super responsive to what are the needs of the community. When there was a large influx of individuals being resettled here from Afghanistan, we developed in collaboration with Hiscox Legal Aid Society and the Catholic Charities Refugee Resettlement Program, the Interfaith Works Refugee Resettlement Program, and RISE's Refugee Resettlement Program, a comprehensive response to the influx of immigrants to try to work systematically through and helping people apply for their asylum applications or whatever other applications they were eligible for. We've done similar work with the Ukrainians, especially around TPS. And on an ongoing basis, you know, while we don't have the busloads of individuals coming up from the southern border that show up at New York City and then are put in hotels, we do have a very steady stream of immigrants arriving. We have large communities from Cuba that have access to representation or access to legal status that we try to assist. We have farm workers, we have refugees that are following, we have individuals who are following their refugee family members who did not come through the traditional refugee process and need assistance then. So what do? We really try to be very conscious about being culturally aware and giving appropriate immigration legal services. So we have our forms all interpreted. We try to bring in culturally appropriate interpreters, whether it is from the professional interpreters that live here or via Voyance, which is like language line, it's a telephonic one. We never have family members act as interpreters, and we even try to be conscious of community members who may be certified interpreters who, you know, due to confidentiality reasons, we'd want to be mindful about having them interpret. We really try to focus on particular refugee communities and engage members of that community to encourage participation by reluctant families. So we really, you know, do a lot of outreach in the communities, work with community leaders and try to bring people in. And we also do advocacy and work at the city and state levels to try to make immigration law better for New Yorkers, whether it's, you know, doing advocacy around, you know, DACA when that came up, the Afghan Adjustment Act, we've been doing a lot of advocacy around to try to make the lawmakers aware of the fact that, you know, these are community members that are contributing and are part of our society, they're part of our community, and we need to help them be able to fully participate through lawful status. So here's a video about our immigration pro bono program.
Hi, my name is Marisol Estrada Cruz. I work as a legal fellow with the ONA Pro Bono Immigration Program. We help facilitate the relationship between our pro bono volunteers and the pro bono clients. And so this is done by having us evaluate each individual case by doing a screening with a client that comes to us. Our clients come either by word of mouth, by a referral, or they find us online. They'll reach out via email or they will give us a call. And these clients are all immigrants who live in the central New York or upstate New York region. And when we evaluate them and we screen them, if we find out that they are eligible for an immigration benefit, then we will work to see if there is a pro bono immigration attorney or just a pro bono attorney who is interested in immigration or maybe interested in helping the immigrant community. From start to finish, the pro bono team helps support our pro bono volunteers, and we provide technical support and guidance throughout the process. We help with editing forms, editing filings, reviewing applications before they're submitted. We also help prep for interviews if that's part of the process. We help really with anything that our volunteers need. And our program would not exist without the help of our volunteer attorneys, our volunteer students, our volunteer interpreters, and everyone else that assists with our immigration cases. That's what we do, and we love our volunteers. And if you're watching this video, I hope that you consider volunteering with our program.
Great. What I do want to pitch too is that so far the people that you have seen started out as volunteers with us. Mary John was a volunteer with us. Marisol was a volunteer with us. We love our volunteers. So sometimes we're lucky enough to even convince them to work with us on an ongoing basis. All right, so the next area of practice is regarding debt and student loans. Now, this is an area that we only expanded into really in 2019 to 2020 to start with, due to what we saw really was an overwhelming need. So we can run through some of these stats quickly.
So, the city of Syracuse is ranked 10th in the country for the highest number of families living on less than $35,000 a year. And you might say, well, why does that matter? Well, people who make under $35,000 a year might not be able to keep up with their debts as well as people who make more money. And, the cost of living for everyone is increasing. And the people who increasingly have issues with cost of living increases are people who live under the $35,000 income line. Neighborhoods where people of color are targeted by debt collectors with more aggressive collection efforts as well. They also have been shown to have a higher likelihood of being sued than people who live in majority white neighborhoods. Why that is, no one knows, but it might also be that people in those white neighborhoods have access to attorneys and legal services that can help them deal with collections before they reach the status of a lawsuit. People who are living under the poverty line in a lot of different areas are also more likely to be garnished. Why that is a good question. It's probably also due to access, because you're more likely to be able to obtain an attorney who can negotiate a settlement of your debt if you are of a higher income. 12% of New Yorkers owe student loan debt. But an interesting statistic within that is that Black students actually owe a disproportionately high amount of that debt. And it's because people of color are more likely to be undergrads at private for-profit institutions. They're actually twice as high as at public four-year colleges. So that means that they incur higher debt and they have a lower amount of earning potential after graduation. So the work we do on both collection and student loans is actually as a direct result of those statistics that show people of color are more likely to have judgments against them and have high interest student loans. All right, go ahead, Giselle.
Yeah, great. So there are tons of barriers to access in consumer lawsuits. And I'll say we provided testimony at the chief judge's hearing on access to justice and helped provide some input into the Permanent Commission on Access to Justice's report that included a focus on consumer debt and particularly medical debt this past year. So if you're interested in reading more about ideas of ways to overcome barriers to access, the Permanent Commission on Access to Justice actually came up with some really great ideas to try to address these concerns. But some of the biggest concerns are, well, number one, the huge number of defaults. Number two, that the notices on legal documents are only in English, and even with that, are in language that historically has been very difficult for most of the clients we're serving, especially those who might not have, a high level of reading, like above 5th grade, to understand. And then, of course, the settlement issues, the creditors are always represented by counsel. The debtors are almost never represented by a counsel. And there's really no standardized settlement documents or settlement process, the way there might be in other areas of law. So we've been doing a lot of work in debt collection. We have our walk-in community clinics to help people filling out answers. We've got that going over at Mundy Branch and actively need additional volunteers. We've been really actively advocating for changes to medical debt collections, particularly by hospitals. Syracuse, I think we went over the general debt, but Syracuse has the highest rate of medical debt in the entire state. And so we've been actively trying to advocate for hospitals to stop suing low-income community members, and particularly the SUNY hospitals to stop suing low-income community members. And the governor did indicate in her executive budget that she was persuaded by these arguments that the End Medical Debt campaign has been involved in, that we've been part of. So we're still, hopefully in a week or two, we'll have more info on that. But for right now, many of those lawsuits were put on pause, at least the filing of new ones. And then I'm really thrilled to say we have a new program where we are doing student loan counseling. We're part of a statewide group of folks that are doing this to try to help people understand what their rights are around debt relief and how to access loan forgiveness. So really exciting program. And here's Amelia, who runs our debt program.
Sal, before you jump into that, one thing I just wanted to say was that our student loan program, just as a shout out, there's no income limits to that.
That's right.
So if you are an attorney or a member of the community, you can come to us for help with your student loans. And a number of our first clients have been attorneys in the community. So I would like to give everyone just kind of that shout out that you can also participate in that program.
Awesome.
My name is Amelia Coley, and I am the director of the debt program at the Volunteer Lawyers Project of Central New York. The debt program assists individuals struggling with debt issues and those who have been sued by debt collectors. We have a special focus on medical debt, but can also assist people who have been sued by credit card companies, banks, and other lenders. We have also recently launched a student debt program under the EdCap grant, which allows us to assist people of all incomes with resolving their student loan issues, from finding the right repayment plan to exploring options for forgiveness and discharge of student loan debt, to getting defaulted loans back into good standing. We utilize pro bono volunteers through our monthly limited scope debt clinics held at the Mundy Branch Library, where volunteers and interns might help clients draft pro se answers, in addition to paperwork to vacate default judgments. They might help answer simple consumer and debt questions, and also answer any issues that might come up on a limited scope basis. We may also utilize interns and volunteers to complete research projects, in addition to updating other materials such as short FAQ pages about common debt or consumer questions, draft discovery templates, and other documents that might be used by the program in years to come.
Great. So we do have a lot more pro bono opportunities. We have an elder law program that runs a weekly surrogate court pro se clinic. We have community clinics, including an amazing veterans program that's run once a month by John Powers. I see you, John, on this list. At the Vet Center, we also will be doing our annual Valor Day at the Veterans Expo again in November, where we do simple wills for vets, as well as advice and counsel. We have weekly clinics up at Westcott Community Center, out at the library, Central Library, East Syracuse Library, all over the place. And those clinics are so critical because they are really the way that community members who do not know their legal rights access legal services. They get advice and counsel and also get directed to the right place to help them out. And Pauline runs a wonderful small business program, which is really an economic opportunity program with the idea that those who have not had access to a more traditional economy may have a lot of success in small business. So We hope that you'll consider getting involved with us. We hope that if you are already involved with us, you'll continue to be so and take an interest in some of the other ongoing services that we have. We are soon going to be rolling out a new partnership with the courts that we're really excited about to help unrepresented litigants getting advice and counsel up at the law library. So, you know, and then we do have a pro bono opportunities page for those who are interested in signing up to become a volunteer. I should just run through real quickly too. We provide primary malpractice insurance, we provide training, we provide supervision, we provide resources like if you need access to Westlaw while working on our cases, or you need access to a computer while working on our cases. We're here to make it so that you can get involved in fighting inequity in our communities, and we're going to make sure you have the resources, training, and skill that you need to do that. And we have more on Syracuse stats. I believe this was circulated to everybody. And we do have some suggested reading if you want to go in further on some of these issues. Let's see. Carrie, I see you're up. I never gave you an opportunity to give a code, so give a code.
Here we go. Here's your code, ladies and gentlemen. And here we are. Right to counsel. Your code is right to counsel, used in a sentence. We sure hope the right to counsel legislation is successful so more of our neighbors can benefit from solid legal representation in landlord-tenant court. Right to counsel. Thank you.
Thanks, Carrie. So we have our info up here. If there's any questions, you are welcome to reach out to us directly, either through here or reaching out to me directly or Pauline. We really appreciate you taking the time to learn more about Volunteer Lawyers Project of Central New York with us and kind of the role we try to play in filling some of the gaps and needs here in the community. And if you have any questions, I didn't see any in the question and answer box, but you are welcome to still drop any in if you have any. And otherwise, we just really appreciate your time and we hope to be hearing from you soon.
One of the other things we should point out is that you're also eligible for CLE credit as a result of volunteering for VLP. And I know everyone, is probably here to get a little bit of CLE credit, but you're also eligible for CLE credit as a result of working on a case or participating in a clinic or volunteering with VLP.
Yeah, thank you for reminding folks of that, Pauline. Great. Well, thank you so much. We hope to hear from you soon, and take care, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, Sal. Thank you, Pauline.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Send me your affirmations. Thank you.
Thank you.